365 stories and rhymes, tales of magic and wonder. Adventure balloon. Eloise raced across the hill, panting and giggling. You can't catch me, she yelled. Her little brother Hal was behind her, running as fast as he could. Scruffy, their dog, barked and yapped as he bounded all along beside Hal. Suddenly, they saw a big basket sitting at the top of the hill. A huge hot air balloon was attached to it, bobbing around in the breeze. "It's beautiful," said Alois. "Let's go for a ride." "Hooray, an adventure!" said Hal. "Come on, Scruffy, let's go." Alois hopped inside the basket, followed by Scruffy. Hal clambered in after them, and then, magically, the balloon began to rise into the sky. They floated up among the fluffy white clouds. Birds fluttered around them, twittering with curiosity. The green hills and tall trees seemed small and far away. Scruffy barked and wagged his tail. "Where shall we go?" Alois called to the birds. They chirped even louder, but the children couldn't understand them. The balloon floated far over the land, and soon they saw a rainbow-colored tent in a green field. "The circus!" Hal cried, clapping his hands. "I want to go to the circus!" At once the balloon floated down from the sky, heading towards the field. As it got closer, clowns, jugglers, and dancers came out of the tent. "Come and join our show!" they called out. As soon as the balloon landed, Alois, Hal, and Scruffy raced inside the tent. It was a bit It was lit by sparkling stars, and colorful balloons floated down to a huge crowd. "Let the show begin!" cried the clown on stilts. Scruffy did flops, Scruffy did flips and somersaults on the back of a white horse. White Hal tiptoed across the tight rope. Alois stepped onto the circus swing, thinking of the birds that had flown around the balloon. "I want to fly like a bird," she whispered. Then she flew from swing to swing in the high roof of the tent. Even faster and higher. The crowd went wild. Later, at the end of the show, the top of the circus tent opened like a lid. Everyone looked up. The hot air balloon was floating above them. "It's time to go," Eloise told Hal and Scruffy. They climbed into the basket and waved to the crowds and all the circus people below. Then the balloon rose up into the clouds again. Eloise, Hal, and Scruffy clung to the basket tightly as they soared with the birds, bees, and butterflies. Suddenly the wind died down. "Look," said Eloise, peering over the edge of the basket. "We are back on the hill again." Gently the balloon bobbed down onto the soft grass, and they all tumbled out. They lay on their backs, looking up at the blue sky. "That was amazing," said Hal. "Woof!" said Scruffy. "What an adventure!" said Eloise. She laughed as the balloon seemed to give a little hop of excitement. "See, the balloon thinks so too," she added with a giggle. "Come on, let's go home." Pet Pal. Betsy felt sad and lonely. Her best friend in the world, Polly, had moved away. "Why don't we go to the park?" suggested her mum. "Or you could read a book." But nothing was fun without Polly. Betsy Dant came home and gave her a hug. "Don't look so sad. I've got a new friend for you." He opened a basket and Betsy peeped inside. "Meow!" A sweet little kitten peered back at her. But Betsy looked away. She didn't want a new friend. She wanted Polly. The kitten clambered up onto the chair beside Betsy. It patted her hand with a soft paw, but Betsy pulled her hand away. So the kitten nudged her with his little nose. Its whisker tickled Betsy's arm, and she couldn't help smiling. "All right," she said, "let's play." Betsy made necklaces with color beads and threads, and the kitten loved the pounce on them. Then When Betsy painted a picture, the kitten added her own pretty paw prints to the scene. After lunch, the two played hide and seek in the garden. Then, just before the tea time, Betsy read a book to her new friend. Betsy didn't stop thinking about Polly, but she stopped feeling so sad. Instead, she thought about how much Polly would like the kitten. After tea, the kitten curled up on Betsy's lap. Betsy wrote a letter to Polly. She had lots to say. She told Polly all about the little kitten and the things they had done together. It was fun to remember their adventures. I still miss you very much, she wrote, but I think I will enjoy writing letters to you, and my new kitten will make sure I have plenty to tell you. Wintery Mintery. Wintery Mintery Cuttery Corn, Apple Seed and Apple Thorn. Wire Briar Limberlock, 3 geese in a flock. One flew east and one flew west, and one flew over the cuckoo nest. Cuckoo, cuckoo, what do you do? Cuckoo, cuckoo, what do you do? In April I open my bill. In May I sing all day. In June I change my time. In July away I fly. In August away I must. 3 ducks in a brook. Look, look, look. 3 ducks in a brook. One is white, one is brown, one is swimming upside down. Look, look, look. 3 ducks in a brook. Row, row, row your boat. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I let it go again. Why did you let it go? Because it bit my finger so. Which finger did it bite? This little finger on the right. Sugarplum and the butterfly. Sugarplum was always given the most important work. The fairy queen said it was because she was the kindest and most helpful of all the fairies. Sugarplum, said the fairy queen one day, I've got a very important job for you to do. I want you to make a rose petal ball gown for my birthday ball next week. It will be my pleasure, said Sugarplum happily. Sugarplum began to gather cobwebs for the thread and rose petals for the dress. While she was collecting the thread, she found a butterfly caught in a cobweb. Oh, you poor thing, sighed Sugarplum. Very carefully she untangled the butterfly, but his wing was broken. Sugarplum laid the butterfly on a bale of feathers. She gathered some nectar from a special flower and fed him a drop at a time. Then she set about mending his wing with a magic spell. After 6 days, the butterfly was better. He was very grateful, but now Sugarplum was behind with her work. Oh dear, I shall never finish the Fairy Queen's ball gown by tomorrow, she cried. Whatever shall I do? The butterfly comforted her. Don't worry, Sugarplum, he said. We will help you. He gathered all his friends together. There were yellow, blue, red, and orange butterflies. He told them how Sugarplum had rescued him from the cobweb and helped him mend his wing. The butterflies gladly gathered up lots of rose petals and dropped them next to Sugarplum. Then the butterflies flew away to gather more cobwebs while Sugarplum arranged all the petals. Back and forth went Sugarplum's hand with her needle and thread, making the finest cobweb stitches. Sugarplum added satin ribbons and bows. When she had finished, Sugarplum was very pleased with the bow gown. Dear friend, she said to the butterfly, I couldn't have finished the dress without your help, and I couldn't have flown again without your kindness and help, said the butterfly, and the fairy queen was delighted with her new ball gown. The best zoo ever. Zoe, the zookeeper, had just finished doing her last round of the day to check on the animals. Normally, at this time, the zoo would be noisy with happy squawks, growls, splashes, and tots. But not tonight. Silence had replaced the usual animal chatter. What's wrong? Zoe asked the big gray elephant as she passed his enclosure on the way to the main gates. Why is everyone so quiet? We're bored, trumpet the elephant. Nothing exciting ever happens here. Zoe didn't want the animal to be unhappy. What could she do to cheer them up? That night, as she lay in bed, Zoe suddenly had a great idea. She decided to call some of her friends in the morning to see if they could help her put it into action. All of the following week, the zoo was noisy with the sound of hammering and sawing, digging and drilling. The animals looked on curiously as Zoe and her friends rushed around, wearing hard hats and tool belts and carrying planks of wood and plastic pipes. At last, the project was finished. Zoe caught all the animals together. They couldn't believe their eyes. There in the middle of the zoo was the most amazing adventure play area. I hope this will stop you from being bored, said Zoe. I declare this zoo-tastic park open. And for the rest of the day, the animals played hide and seek in the trees and bushes. They slithered down the slide and swung from the bars of the jungle gym. That evening, as Zoe settled the animals back into their enclosures, she smiled at their happy faces. Thank you so much, Zoe, cried the big gray elephant. We had so much fun today. This is really the best zoo ever. The wedding of Mrs. Fox. Mrs. Fox was feeling very sad because her husband had died. Don't be so sad, said her friend Mrs. Cat. You will soon find someone else to marry. But Mrs. Fox wasn't so sure. I will never find another husband as good as Mr. Fox, she sighed. He had such a beautiful bushy tail and such a lovely pointed mouth. The next day, Mrs. Cat knocked on Mrs. Fox's door. Here is Mr. Badger to see you, she said. And in came Mr. Badger. Mrs. Fox could not deny that he had lovely black and white stripes, but he did not have a beautiful bushy tail or a lovely pointed mouth. So when he asked Mrs. Fox to be his wife, she turned him down. The following morning, Mrs. Cat knocked on her friend's door again. This time, she had brought Mr. Squirrel to see Mrs. Fox. Mrs. Fox admired Mrs. Squirrel's beautiful bushy tail, but he did not have a lovely pointed mouth. So when he begged her to marry him, Mrs. Fox said she would rather not. The following morning, Mrs. Cat knocked on Mrs. Fox's door yet again. Here is Mr. Mouse to see you, she said. And in came Mr. Mouse. Mrs. Fox had admitted that he did have an attractive pointed mouth, but no beautiful bushy tail. So when he popped the question, Mrs. Fox was flattered, but still refused him. A few days later, Mrs. Cat knocked on Mrs. Fox's door again. There is someone to see you, she said. And in came a very handsome fox. He had a lovely pointed mouth and a beautiful bushy tail. The handsome fox visited Mrs. Fox every day, and soon they fell in love. Mrs. Fox, will you be my bride? Asked the handsome fox. Yes, replied Mrs. Fox, and they lived happily ever after. The Nutcracker. It was Christmas Eve, and Clara and her brother Fritz were very excited. That night there was going to be a magnificent party at her house. Fritz was busy playing with his toy soldier, while Clara finished decorating their enormous tree with a beautiful fairy in a sugar-plum colored dress. At last the guests started arriving for the party. Look, there's Godfather's Drosmeyer, said Fritz. Their godfather was a famous toy maker. He hugged the children close, and they gave them their gifts. Fritz eagerly unwrapped a mechanical gobstopper machine. For Clara there was a wooden nutcracker in the shape of a soldier. I love him, Clara whispered. Thank you, godfather. But he's a soldier, said Fritz. He should be mine. Fritz tried to snatch the nutcracker away from her. He pulled and Clara tugged and then crack! The nutcracker's leg snapped off. "I can fix him, Clara," said the godfather gently. He pulled a little tool pouch from his pocket and quickly mended the nutcracker. "Oh, thank you," cried Clara. She placed the nutcracker carefully under the Christmas tree and went to join the party. Finally, the last dance was danced and the guests had said their goodbyes. The family went to their bed and the house was dark and quiet. Bong bong! Clara awoke to hear the clock striking midnight. She suddenly remembered she left the nutcracker under the tree, so she tiptoed downstairs. As she bent down to pick him up, the tree suddenly started to grow. Or was it that Clara was shrinking? "What's happening?" she cried. "Don't be afraid," said a kind voice. Clara turned around. Her nutcracker had come alive. Behind him, Fritz's soldiers were sitting in the toy box. Before Clara could speak, she heard a scurrying sound and an army of mice poured into the room, led by a giant mouse king with a golden crown. "Attack!" he squeaked. "To battle!" ordered the nutcracker, and Fritz's soldiers marched boldly towards the attacking mice. Suddenly Clara saw the Mouse King spring at the nutcracker. She snatched off her slipper and hurled it at the Mouse King. He fell to the ground and his crown tumbled from his head. With the leader defeated, the mice scurried away in fear. The nutcracker picked up Clara's slipper. "I owe you my life, Clara," he said. "You broke the spell that was put on me long ago by a wicked mouse queen." Clara gasped. The nutcracker had been transformed into a handsome prince. "Come," said the prince, and he helped Clara into a magical sleigh. "I take you to a wonderful adventure." The walls of the sitting room seemed to fade away, and the sleigh drew up. They climbed aboard, and it flew high into a starry sky. "Where are we?" gasped Clara. "This is the kingdom of sweets," said the prince. Gently the sleigh landed beside the magnificent marzipan flowers. "Look," said the prince, waving to a fairy by the gate. "It's the Sugarplum fairy." "Prince Nutcracker!" cried the fairy. "You are home at last." "This is Princess Clara," said the prince. "She saved my life and broke the Mouse Queen's spell." The Sugarplum fairy hugged Clara. "Let's celebrate," she said. Inside the palace, Clara and the prince feasted on delicious cakes and sweets. They watched in wonder as the Sugarplum fairy twirled around the room to the beautiful music. Clara's eyelids began to droop, and then the sound of music became fainter and fainter. When Clara woke up on Christmas morning, she found herself curled up under the Christmas tree next to the Nutcracker. "I've had the most wonderful adventure," sighed Clara, and she told her parents all about it. "It was just a dream, darling," said her mother. Clara gazed up at the sugar-plum-colored fairy on top of the tree. Then she looked at the wooden nutcracker in her hands. "Perhaps it was," she said. But then Clara noticed something glinting on the carpet, and a smile spread across her face. It was a tiny golden crown.